what have we learned? For any of these channels, it does come back down to creating content. And there aren't shortcuts to these really. You need to think through them. You need to take your time. You need to plan. The rewards are worthwhile. I have done all of these, and I have to say that it is, at least for myself, it has been very pleasurable is wrong. It's been very rewarding to go through these. There is a sense of accomplishment I get completing an episode or completing a series or something like that, or publishing content. So there's a value to it. And it is amazing how many people have seen that I've done this, professionally, that have said, oh, wow, that's impressive. And it may not feel as impressive to me, but it is to them. And so, more power to me, I guess. And particularly as you're earlier in your career, I think this is a great way to prove yourself. Or if you're early into an area of expertise, this is a way to prove your bona fides. But take your time and don't jump into it blindly, but go in saying, okay, I'm going to put some effort into this, and this is how I'm going to do so. With that, think these challenges, there are challenges and concerns specific to each of these channels. It is very different writing versus podcasting versus recording yourself on a screen or putting yourself on behind a camera or in front of a camera. So it's worth doing a little research on those, figure out what you're going to be most suitable to and most comfortable in. If you look at this, you're like, this is just work and I don't see this being fun at all, then don't. Or more importantly, if you get started on it and you realize, I thought I was going to like this, I don't be afraid to bail out. Don't be afraid to say no. Yeah, there's something to be said for you to, sort of work your way through it. But that's if you're getting over a hump and you're going from a point where I don't like this to, I know I'm going to like this if I stick with it. That's different from, I don't think I'm ever going to like it. If you get to a point where I don't think I'm ever going to like it, I would say don't do it. It's too much work, and it will come through on the presentation. The content people will be able to sense that you just don't want to do that. And so they're not going to follow it. They're not going to want to, people don't like to see other people suffer. And finally, be ready to toot your own horn. Don't be afraid to go out there and say, hey, I put this thing out there. Hey, here's something that you might find interesting or you may learn from, because that's part of the promotion and building a community. All right, questions and comments.
It makes me want to get back into this again, like more than I have been able to lately.
It's funny that I have that kind of stuff has that effect on me a lot as well. I just started listening to The 4-Hour Chef. I've had the book for, the audiobook for probably a couple of years now. And finally I was just like, you know what, I'm going to start listening to it and listening to Tim Ferriss going through that. And the chef is more about, particularly at the point I'm at, I'm a few chapters in, and it's more about just learning stuff quickly and things like that. But just listening to that and just, it's like, sometimes you hear about this, you're like, this sounds like fun. I want to try it out. And it doesn't hurt I think that's why it doesn't hurt at all to go back and, periodically re-listen to like the 4-Hour Work Week or Crush It or all of those other books that, we've talked about over the years that are about that kind of work, or the passive income, I forget that one, but the smart passive income or smart passive investor or whatever, or that one, SPI, smart passive income, I think is what it is. Anyways, those kinds of motivational type tools of like, hey, here's some things people have done. And you're like, oh, wow, that would be cool to get into it. And honestly, that's why I have had multiple times that I was going to stop like the podcast part. And usually it doesn't last very long before I'm like, I actually enjoyed doing it. So I want to get back into it. Other questions and comments?
Yes, we're going. Yeah, what is hard? Is it being consistent? Like, do you plan everything out? Like, let me say, you have to talk for. I mean, your topics out. Like, I mean, being consistent is it, how hard is that going to be for you? In
I think it depends on your personality. For myself, it depends on your personality. And actually, I think what your normal life is like.
Mhm.
If you have a very, like a better term, rigid sort of schedule that you follow, where, you Monday through Friday, you get up at a certain time, you do certain things, you go to work a certain time, you get home at a certain time, you have a very static kind of schedule. I think it's going to be a lot easier. If you're somebody that stuff comes up on a regular basis and it changes things around, then it's much more difficult. For myself, that the consistency is by far the hardest thing, because I do my stuff on a weekly basis. Like each week, there are certain things, like I have to get X number of episodes done, produced and in the can and ready to be, ready for the publishing. And that typically means that I have to, from start to scratch, do X number of episodes of whatever, between the video stuff and the podcast, or, when the podcast is live and things like that. And then I have to work in other stuff. And sometimes, some weeks, Monday or Tuesday of the week, I'm pretty much already, done with the work I need to do that week. Sometimes it's Sunday afternoon and I'm like, crap, I have got it. Or sometimes it's Sunday evening. I have got to get this stuff done, because that's sort of my cutoff. Is like Monday morning is when a week starts and Sunday night is when it ends. So if I haven't gotten it done by Sunday night, I'm really going to be stressed out. So doing that, a little bit, that's probably the hardest part. But over time, it does get better, because you have those. There've been the times where I've just pushed it off and suddenly it's Sunday night and I've got 3 hours before I want to go to bed, and I have got 3 hours probably that I'm going to be spending on recording and editing and doing stuff. And it's so painful that, like, the next summer I'm like, I'm going to find a way to get started sooner. And then knowing that too, there's times where it's like, hey, I got done on Tuesday, so I'm going to start into the next week. I'm going to get ahead a little bit. And it's just, I think everybody's different, but as you get into it, you learn how you work and what motivates you. And, hopefully you'll get, to me, this goes back to the professional development side, as you get better at being able to do that. The stuff that I've done now, which is crazy, it seems to me now that it's been years since I did the first podcast, and a few years before that when we did our first blog. And although the content produced has changed over the years, I have very much gotten better at being able to manage my time and schedule things and estimate things and do a lot of stuff that would have a value to my job, no matter what I'm doing, whether I'm managing people, whether I'm writing code, whether I'm designing systems, whatever. There's a lot of life skills, I guess, that have come out of these, and which does go back to a lot of times why I recommend at least try out creating a site and doing a blog. And you've seen some of this. I mean, you've written blog articles, and you know how hard it can be to say, all right, I'm going to write a blog article once a month for the next 3 months, and being able to get that done. It's like there's work involved. And so doing that on a regular basis, getting that cadence of I'm churning something out once a month, once a week, whatever it is, I think really does help build you into a better, I think not only a better professional, but I think even a better person, that you can just be more reliable and comfortable, because you'll get it as you get those things done. You will be more confident in your own abilities. Great question, though.
Thanks, man. Probably another thing I wanted to ask was like, do you have, like, for instance, if you have a target audience, do you have to put into their attention span, like you don't want it to become, like, let me say, too long or too short, or like the average, like, okay, maybe I can capture my audience in 30 minutes or 1 hour or whatever?
Yeah, I think that very much, and that's a great question because I really didn't touch on that. Your yeah, the timing is important. Part of your, your theme and your approach, I think it helps a lot to be consistent in roughly the time amount that you can do, whether it's 5 minutes or 15 minutes or an hour. Um, for written stuff like a blog, is it 300 words? Is it 1,000 words? Is it 2,000 words? Those kinds of things do matter because people will check, particularly audio and video. People may check out. It'll be like, they're great listening to you on a podcast for 10 minutes on whatever the topic is. But if you stretch it out to 20, it's just too much or too dry or whatever, particularly for educational stuff. That's why for the developerpreneur YouTube stuff, I do my best to generally try to keep it around 15 to 20 minutes. If it goes a little short, that's okay. If it goes longer, I usually am apologizing that I'm sorry it took 25 minutes to get through this, um, because of the topics we're covering. Um, it seems like if you drag it out too much, it becomes too much to present and for them to be able to absorb. And that's going to vary a lot by what you're talking about. If you're talking about something lighthearted like movie reviews, sometimes people can sit there for an hour and listen to you do a review on a movie. But if you're talking about, I don't know, big data analysis, people may be clinically dead having to listen to that for 60 minutes because it's just so boring and dry. And some of that's your presentation, is how do you make it exciting? But it's easier also, just if it's for comprehension, people just have limits to what they can do. If you go beyond an hour, you're really going to be challenged to have people be able to comprehend your content. But also, they could always go back and they could review it. But for me, it's easier to just like keep it smaller snippets and say, okay, we're going to sit down for 15 minutes and talk about this topic. So that's a great question, because I did not really touch on timing, but that is another critical, the amount of content that you do, the time or the length is very important part of your process.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
One possible compendium to this one, Rob, might be how to not necessarily monetize, but what approaches you might want to take to advertising or promoting your blog or your whatever content you do. Because one thing you got to be careful of, especially with some of these sites and that you can use, is if you just pick like an advertisement site, you don't know what ads might pop up. So they might not be the correct content or the right flavor for what content you're producing. And that could turn people off too.
Yeah. And that's in the world of cancel culture and stuff like that. That is probably more critical than it was even a couple of years ago, because you could have something that has some ad that shows up and suddenly you're in the middle of a bunch of controversial stuff that you don't want any part of. So that's interesting, because that could be, that definitely monetization could be easily be a presentation in itself. And it's something, it's an interesting one for me, because it's something I don't know that I've solved that problem yet for myself even. I'm constantly torn with, actually it's probably, my problem is more that I just like trying out all of the monetization tools and platforms more than I care about actually monetizing stuff. If I ever find one that works, then that may change my tune. But to date, nothing has ever worked enough for me that it's been like, oh, okay, this is definitely the way to go. But there are definitely things that you need to consider that you do not want to do, because it could effectively kill your whole thing. I mean, there are content producers out there that had made a ton of money, monetized the heck out of stuff, and either because of their content or their advertisers, stuff like that, ended up in a lot of trouble and lost a lot of money out of it. So you gotta think about that kind of stuff. That's good suggestion though. Other questions and comments? I'm hearing none. So as always, thank you so much for spending some time listening to this and just hanging out with us. Appreciate your time. If there's any other questions or comments or anything, you can contact us in a myriad of ways. Email info@developernoor.com. We've got a contact us form out on developernoor.com. We have our YouTube channel that's out there. If you go to YouTube and search Developernoor, DEVELPRENEUR, you will find it. We have a Vimeo channel that's vimeo.com/developernoor. We've got a Facebook page. We had shut down for a while Twitter stuff. We moved to a different one, but we've gone back and now we have a specific @developernoor for Developernoor posts. And I've sort of changed that up a little bit, but it's very much for the most part focused on one, you'll see our YouTube stuff, blog articles, videos that show up on Vimeo. You'll see links to those, our posts, but also we're trying to do a lot more of some of these sort of like tech tip sites and the related kinds of articles to try to just send a steady stream of technical little tidbits and articles to help you become a better developer, because our goal is to make every developer better. All right, have a good day.